Rundown Nation. Welcome to the College Football Rundown. I'm Woj.
And I'm Wahl.
Episode 16 already. We're down to the wire here as far as the season goes. A lot of teams playing to get into their conference championships, and it should be a pretty exciting week. There's games Friday and Saturday. We'll start right off with Cincinnati 10-1 at Memphis 10-1, 2:30 p.m. on ABC. This is in the Friday slate of DraftKings, Wall.
Hey, big game. We told you guys about it a few weeks back. Look forward to this one. Put it on your schedule. Well, it's here. Cincinnati plus 11, over under of 57. Cincinnati plus 330 to win it on the money line, which you'll figure out why I'm telling you that when I go through this. Implied odds of this game, Cincinnati winning 23.26% chance. They play this game 4 times. That's saying Cincinnati will win less than 1 time. These are 2 of the best group of 6 teams in the nation. I don't know that I agree with that. Memphis only lost to Temple. Cincinnati lost to the number 1 team in the nation, Ohio State. Cincinnati beat Temple. Game later in the year, yes. Memphis has been hot since. Maybe not a great comparison. I hear people yelling at me through their speakers right now that, Memphis is a different team right now. I agree. Memphis trounced South Florida at South Florida. Cincinnati squeaked by against them with a field goal win. Mismatch signals here. Pure number standpoint, though, money line is off, I'm thinking. The problem, this matchup could go 50-50. Memphis caught the home game this year. I'm going to take it anyways, though. I think I'm going to put the numbers on my side, and I'm going to tell these lines makers, hey, Cincinnati wins this game more than 1 out of 4 times, and I'm going to take my chances, Woj.
I got a bit of a sleeper in DFS here, Wall. Kadarian Jones, the wide receiver from Memphis, is 3,800. He's at back-to-back games with 6 touches after a week or 3 weeks ago having a bye. I don't know if him and the QB sat down and started talking it out, but I like that trend. I like that price. It's a risky pick, but at 3,800, if he gets another 6 touches, maybe a touchdown, that's well over value, Wall. Can't go without saying when we're talking about Memphis, DeMonte Koki, he's the number 1 wide receiver from Memphis. He's 6,300, so he's priced pretty well himself. He's still the top dog, like I said. He's going to get touches, so this is more of a cash game pick, I would imagine, especially at that price, because he's going to get touches. He's always going to have the option for that touchdown in that game, so that's a good pick. Quick note on the running backs for Memphis. Kenny Gainwell, who's been dominating all year and has been the workhorse for that Memphis offense, is currently the most expensive running back on DraftKings at 8,100. Isn't getting the amount of points he used to. That's because Patrick Taylor Jr. is back from injury. He started the year, then got injured, was out for a long time, came back a couple weeks ago. Last week versus UCF, he had 30.5 points and actually carried the ball more than Gainwell. Taylor's 6,700 on DraftKings right now, so he's still a little expensive, especially with the question mark. It's a risky pick because you don't know if they're going to split carries or not. I definitely would not take Gainwell this week at 8,100. And if you're going to pick one of the two, I would take Taylor for sure. Another note for the Cincinnati side of it, QB Desmond Ridder was injured a few weeks ago, and it shows in the points, and it looks like he's still struggling with a shoulder injury. On that note, Michael Warner II, the running back for Cincinnati, is 6,700. He's been picking up the slack. Still not quite impressive numbers, but not bad. It's just an option there if they're going to eventually end up having to score a bunch of points in this one. He might be the guy to do it, or if they have the lead, who knows? But he might be a solid pick. Let's move it to the Big Ten, Wall. Big rivalry game here. We'll see if Jim Hardball can get it done. But Ohio State, the undefeated at 11-0, at Michigan 9-2, 11 a.m. on Fox. This is in the Saturday slate of DraftKings.
This is a big game. Great game for us fans of the Big Ten. I know a lot of people that listen to our podcast are fans of the Big Ten. Great year in general for the Big Ten, Woj. Very hard to argue the Big Ten is not the best conference in the country right now. This game, Ohio State minus 9.5, over under a 50.5. This line shows no respect for the rivalry. I am not happy where they put this one. Perhaps it's right, but I don't wager on perhaps. Ohio State moved to number 1 in the nation. I don't know that that was deserved. They almost gave the game to Penn State last week on their own turf. Remember, too, Penn State was without their starting quarterback at the end of the game. You could argue reason Ohio State got behind is because they made a couple mistakes. Well, that's quite contradictory because the best team and the best teams, for that matter, in the nation don't make those mistakes and don't put themselves in that position. I applaud the playoff committee for punishing the SEC weakness of schedule, but they picked the exact wrong team to punish. LSU, not to get off on too much of an aside, but LSU played a crappy team in Arkansas, but it was a conference game, mandated by the conference. They'd scheduled Texas earlier in the year. That's the reason they weren't playing a cupcake last week. Ohio State's move up, probably not deserving, but things will likely sort themselves out there later in the year. Getting back to the game, Michigan is a hot team as of late. Since that narrow loss to Penn State at home, they've just been crushing teams. Michigan is a defensive-first team. Their D's led by Don Brown, the defensive coordinator, number 4 in the nation, total yards allowed. Who's number 1 in the nation, you think, Woj?
Ohio State.
Ohio State is number 1 in the nation in total yards allowed on defense. Defensive battle this game will be the best defense Ohio State has faced all year. Obviously the best Michigan has faced also, with Ohio State being number 1 in the nation. Ohio State has a very good chance of winning this game, but that's a lot of points to give in this rivalry to a team that is so hot as of late. Personally, I won't be taking any action because I have a futures bet on Michigan for the win totals over on the season. I don't want to add risk to an already unlikely scenario, I'll say, but it's easier to figure out who I'm cheering for and where I think the mistake is in that line.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see if Hardball can finally pull it off against Ohio State. Like Wahl said, 2 great defenses, tough to touch in DFS. I think the 50.5 is even strong. If Michigan's going to have a chance, they're going to slow it down for sure. Don Brown will have something cooked up here on the defensive side of the ball. That being said, Shea Patterson's only 6,600, and he put up back-to-back good weeks. 2 weeks ago versus Michigan State, 32.9 points, and last week versus Indiana, 35.1. Again, Michigan State and Indiana aren't the Ohio State defense, though. Justin Fields is way too expensive for the implied points at 8,100, and the Ohio State wide receivers are always hit and miss, and it disgusts me. But let's keep it in the Big Ten, Wall. Let's move on to Indiana, who's 7-4 at Purdue, 4-7, 11 a.m. on ESPN2. This game's on Saturday, not in DraftKings. But I think Purdue at home getting 6.5 is pretty exciting, Wall.
Oh, Woj, it's pretty exciting to me too. Indiana, like you said, giving 6.5, over under 55. Interesting line on Purdue +3 in the first quarter. Indiana likely cashed a ticket to a bowl game. Purdue, they're not going to be eligible this year. They don't have a chance. Might surprise people, but I like Purdue here. Normally I'm not betting on a team that's clearly not as good as the other team, but in this instance I like it for what I'm about to say. It's a rivalry game. The home team is getting points. That's a little sexy to me. Both teams are 7-4 against the spread on the season. Purdue has covered the last 3 games in this series. Good chance to continue their streak here, in my opinion. People have asked before about what the past year's games matter, whether they cover the spread or not, what that matters, what the streaks matter. Well, what it matters is it can show the handicapper's bias towards one team or another. It doesn't necessarily mean they were off either, but maybe they adjust the points because they expect more money to come in on one team in the game. This instance, it would assume there's a little bias towards Indiana. I'm probably going to be taking advantage of that. Likely this game will come down to Purdue being able to stop Peyton Ramsey, quarterback on Indiana. 1,890 yards passing on the year. Started week 2 for the injured Penix. Played pretty well since. Having 6 different wide receivers with over 20 receptions each helps. Ability to spread the ball definitely helps the quarterback. What's not going to help the quarterback in this game, I think, is good old Mr. Jack Frost. What do you think, Woj? Does that help a quarterback when there's snow, cold, a lot of wind? Is that helpful to a quarterback?
No, it's not. And it's not even just the quarterback. The wide receivers struggle too, just because it's so slippery. They have to go slower. It gives the secondary a chance, who's already stationary where they're going to throw the ball, a better chance to eye in what's happening. On top of that, the ball's cold, so it's harder to throw. It's harder to catch. I mean, that's why you see when there's bad weather, teams like to keep it on the ground. And I don't think either of these teams are very good on the ground, are they, Wall?
No, they're not. And that's what I'm thinking. Hey, get that Mr. Jack Frosted jersey because he's going to be the 12th man. He's going to help that Purdue defense force Indiana to run, who's, one of the worst running teams in the nation. They could be in trouble. As you said, Purdue kind of sits in that category, too, of being one of the worst run teams in the nation. Knowing all those facts, I'm looking for a real low scoring game here. Probably take the under. Likely going to take Purdue to cover the 6.5 for the reasons I mentioned already.
Sounds like a good argument for sure there, Wall. Let's move to Oregon State, 5-6 at Oregon, 9-2, 3 p.m. on the Pac-12 network. It's in the Saturday slate on DraftKings. Oregon is giving 19, over under of 65.5. So I might have jinxed Oregon last week, Wall, when we were talking about the playoff rankings and how they probably deserve to move up a little bit, and then they go out and lose to Arizona State.
You might have, Woj, and I don't want you saying anything this week about Iowa in the playoff rankings because you don't need to jinx them.
Yeah, well, into DFS here. Jake Luton is from Oregon State, QB 7,100 on DraftKings. Luton can be the play here, especially if they're tossing it left and right, trying to catch up with Oregon. He's had back-to-back impressive outings versus Arizona State and Washington State. And don't forget, he's throwing the ball to Isaiah Hodges, too, who's one of the best wide receivers. But I'm going to look on the other side for a wide receiver. Johnny Johnson, the third from Oregon, who's 5,600 on DraftKings. He's a good buy at that price. He got 44% of the touches last week, which is the highest out of any Oregon receiver this year, and he scored 45.7 points. They do like to spread the ball out a little bit, but he's coming off such a hot outing versus terrible pass defense in Oregon State, who gives up 285.5 yards in the air per game. I just like that play. He's coming off a really hot game. I'm gonna ride him. So I'm saying Johnny Johnson III from Oregon at 5,600. What a great price. What a great bargain. Iron Bowl, Wall, the infamous Iron Bowl. Alabama 10-1 at Auburn 8-3, 2:30 p.m. CBS. This is in the Saturday DraftKings slate. Alabama is giving 3.5, and the over/under is 50.
Good game to look at here. Going to be a good game to watch. Great game to watch, I'll say. Both teams coming off brutally difficult games last week, Woj. Auburn barely notched by Samford with their 52-0 win. Bama pulled off a stunner against West Carolina, 66-3. I'm clearly.
Did they have their fourth string in by the end of that game?
Just a game I was definitely not watching for obvious reasons, and I'm clearly poking fun. They didn't play good teams last week. It's not really needed for me to poke fun. Alabama's schedule is a big enough joke as it is already. But Joe Klatt made a good point this week. I thought all along it's not Alabama's job to schedule meaningful football games. Their job is to win national championship, and I agree 100%. Whose job it is, though, the College Football Playoff Committee's job, and fans like us, Woj, to make sure they schedule meaningful football games to actually test themselves.
I mean, you bring up a good point there, Walt. When I look back at the old system, not the playoff system, I'm not saying that the playoff system's bad. I'm just saying that the old system, you had to schedule some out-of-conference games if you were like Notre Dame or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, if you were Alabama's of the world who win every year, then no, you could do cupcakes. But I liked when teams would rise out of the ashes and play really tough games at the beginning of the year, like the Ohio States and some of the other Big Ten teams that had to play tougher competition to keep up with the SEC in the old system just to get into the top two. And I just like that, and I like how that worked out. And I just hope the playoff committee can get us back to that, so it makes these teams play more powerful opponents in their non-conference.
I agree with you, Woj. I agree with you 100%. LSU played a conference game last week and dropped a spot. Alabama played a 3-9 FCS team last week and didn't move. Not even a group of 6 team we're talking about here, Woj. We're talking about an FCS team, what formerly was the Division II team. And not only that, they have a losing record on the year. The playoff committee is not showing us that they're able to make those decisions we just talked about. But we should get back to this game specifically, Woj. In this matchup, Auburn obviously had a much more respectable schedule. Losses coming to Florida, LSU, and Georgia, all good teams. They know how to play teams. Alabama might come into Auburn and have their bell rung a little bit. I like the strategy of taking Alabama under -3. You might see it moving. The line is moving a little bit. And then on the other side of that, take Auburn plus 147 on the money line. This strategy would involve putting enough on Alabama to cover whatever you put on Auburn, which your aim is to make more money on the money line. It's essentially a bet on Auburn with a hedge assuming Alabama won't win by less than 3. Reason I like this strategy, close game at the end, I like the home team, especially a home team like Auburn that's had more trials and tribulations on the season as compared to a team like Alabama. One thing I will say for sure though, Woj, going back to it, if Alabama does lose this game, they do not belong in the top 10. The playoff committee better do their job and get them out of there.
To even make your point even more further, Walt, they lost their starting quarterback, their Heisman candidate, their saving grace, and possibly for the rest of the season, including whatever bowl they go to or playoff, and that should hold some weight as well, because the playoff committee said that's supposed to hold weight, especially if you're playing teams that lose quarterbacks, things like that. And we already saw Ohio State with Sean Clifford leaving the game, and they still get number 1. So I'm not sure what's going on with the playoff committee, but we'll have a better understanding next week for sure. As far as DFS goes in this game, we got Bo Nix versus Mac Jones. I'm not too keen on either of those quarterbacks. Devontae Smith, the wide receiver from Bama, who we've loved all year, is only 6,900. He's the most expensive out of the wide receivers from Alabama. I want to take him at that price, but I'm not going to. The way Nick Saban's worked the ball the last couple weeks with the Tide, not with Tua not being in there for the Tide, has been Najee Harris. And he's 6,700 right now on DraftKings. He scored 37 points versus LSU, 40.9 points versus Mississippi State, and 20.8 points versus a Western Carolina team who they beat 66-3, didn't even play the whole game. But if you see that trend, you know they're not moving the ball as much as they used to in the air with Tua. They are now a ground team with Najee Harris. He's been unstoppable. It's over 6 yards per carry. I like him in that price point, even against an solid Auburn D. I'm just going to take Najee Harris for sure, I think, this week. Well, we're moving back to the Big Ten. And this is a big one for the Big Ten West. Wisconsin 9-2 at Minnesota 10-1, 2:30 p.m. on ABC. This is going to be game day. They're heading to Minnesota. PJ Fleck finally got the calling from game day and ESPN.
Hey, they deserve it. They're playing for a shot at the Big Ten title, right, Woj?
They are. This is whoever wins this game will go to the Big Ten championship to play what likely will be Ohio State.
Pretty sure it's clinched by now. Minnesota in this game, though, is getting 2.5, as you mentioned, at home, over under a 46. Ooh, that's a low one. Makes sense, though. I don't know that I like Minnesota's chances here in this game. Why? They've only played 2 defenses anywhere near comparable to Wisconsin. Penn State squeaked by with a 5-point win against them. Iowa, our boys, who won that game, Woj?
That was an Iowa victory right there. And you know what? We won it on the defensive side of the ball. Minnesota can be stopped on the defensive side of the ball. And Wisconsin's got a pretty good defense, Wall.
They sure do. They sure do. It's not a Minnesota team of the past, you know. They need to score points to win. Wisconsin, as you mentioned, I think they're a team that can give Minnesota trouble in doing that, scoring points, that is. Wisconsin hasn't given up 3,000 yards in the season yet. Only one of 7 teams able to say that. Ohio State, Clemson, Michigan, Utah, Georgia, they all have that bragging right also. Notice any correlation there? The best teams in the nation have the best defenses. Lots of talk about offense this day and age. Daily fantasy might have something to do with that, Woj. Maybe you people are attributing to the fact people like to talk about offenses a lot more. But it doesn't matter, though, because who wins championships? Ultimately, the defenses win championships. Stats kind of prove that. Winner headed to the Big Ten championship to play who? The best defensive team in the nation, Ohio State, who we already talked about. Don't beat a dead horse, Wall. I get it. I know everyone's saying it, but someone has to preach the good word. It's about making money here. So let's use this information that Wisconsin can stop Minnesota, and Minnesota has trouble against good defenses. Put the odds in our favor to win some money. Wisconsin, lay the 2.5.
Ooh. So it's going to be pretty frosty there too, isn't it, Wal?
It will be, Woj. I don't know exactly what they're saying, but I think maybe like 102 inches of snow. Is that what I heard?
It seems like a exaggerated number, Wal, but I get the point. Lots of snow. It doesn't help with the passing game of Minnesota, and only helps the running game of Jonathan Taylor in Wisconsin. So let's steer clear of this one as far as DFS goes. If you were to take anybody, and I talk anybody in this game, Jonathan Taylor's just way too much money. Look at the wide receivers from Minnesota, because if they plan on winning this, they're going to have to air it out. We just told you all the reasons why you shouldn't pick these guys, so I'm not advocating for this. But Tyler Johnson, 6,400, and Rashad Bateman's 5,900. They're both basically equal in the target percentage and targets. So let's just go with Rashad Bateman, the 5,900, and call it a day. I'm not picking him, but if you would like to, 5,900 Rashad Bateman would be the play in that game. While people in DFS love talking about great offenses. Love it, Wall. And that's why we're going to talk about Tulane 6-5 at SMU 9-2, 3 p.m. on ESPNU. This is in the Saturday slate. Tulane is giving 3.5. The over/under is 71, so lots of scoring. The reason DFS is all over this is SMU gives up huge points. There's a huge over/under. SMU is also third in the nation in plays per game with 81.9, and Tulane's not bad themselves. So this is going to be a great DFS game to watch. Be careful with this next one because I feel like a bunch of people are going to jump on this. But Justin McMillan, the QB from Tulane, is 6,400. And everybody's like, wow, you're picking Tulane, a quarterback from Tulane. They like to run the ball. Well, listen, he is part of the run game at Tulane. SMU also gives up a ton of air yardage, so he could air it out. It's possible. He is awesome on the run. Last week against UCF, he rushed 23 times for 102 yards. I'm going to go with the Green Wave quarterback here for sure. Just, again, be wary because it might get picked up quite a bit, just especially at that price and how much points he could possibly pull out. Can't go without talking about an SMU game without talking about James Prochet, the wide receiver. Had a pretty awful week last week. He's netted us 401 points. There are $401 per point with only 19.2. But I'm going to say he bounces back, especially in this game, because this is one that you could just go crazy and have a big James Prochet day. But he is 8,200, so you're hitting the bank there pretty hard. Let's look at the running game for SMU. Xavier Jones is 7,100. So let's take that money we're going to put on Prochet. Let's put it on Xavier Jones. He is pricey for a running back, and he struggled last week as well, same as Prochet, but that was the Navy syndrome. They played Navy. Navy runs the triple option. They waste the clock. They have high time of possession. That's just what we call the Navy syndrome. So he should be a big part of this game, in the outcome of this game, and in the points. I like Xavier Jones a lot from the SMU side. I like Justin McMillan, the quarterback from Tulane, on the Tulane side. One more game left in our little breakdown here. Well, we got Wake Forest 8-3 at Syracuse 4-7, 11:30 a.m. on the ACC network. It's in the DraftKings Saturday slate as well.
Makes sense. Over under a 67. That's DraftKings style. Syracuse plus 3.5. Getting 3.5 from Wake Forest. Wake Forest, a team I jumped on last week, it paid off. I'm looking at them again this week. I'd like to see this spread at 3 or maybe 2.5. It's not budging as of now. I'll be patient, see if I can get it there. Syracuse has not shown anything on the season other than their win against Western Michigan. They beat Duke in a big win a couple weeks ago, but I think that may be an anomaly, Woj. Syracuse only covered 3 games this season as far as the spread goes. Something is off with the lines here. That doesn't happen very much that the books miss it that often. Maybe back to what we said about too much money coming in on Syracuse weekly. Heck, I don't know. It's the only thing I can come up with. Wake is a good football team with losses to Louisville, Virginia Tech, and Clemson. Respectable losses, I guess you could say. Syracuse lost to Louisville and Clemson also. They didn't play Virginia Tech. Syracuse also lost to Florida State, Boston College, Pittsburgh, North Carolina State, Maryland. I really don't want to keep talking about all of Syracuse's losses because I just don't have time for it. Pretty simple bet here, taking a good team to beat a bad one, putting money on them to win by 3.5. That's simple.
That's compelling argument there, Wall. That's a lot of teams.
It is.
This is probably my most excited for DFS game of the week. I know Tulane and SMU is a good one because the over-under 71. This one's 67. Wake Forest, Syracuse, both like to pound it, but I just like it because Kendall Hinton is playing in this game. He's a wide receiver from Wake Forest. He's 6,500. With one of the best wide receivers in college football out, Sage Surratt, he is dominated. Last week he had 34.5 points versus Duke. 3 weeks ago he struggled versus Clemson, but I'll just brush that off. Because it was a better team. He's at 42% of the targets 3 weeks ago and 44% last week. Excuse me, it was 2 weeks ago that they had the Clemson. He had 42% of the targets 3 weeks ago and 44% last week. He is the wide receiver now that Sage Surratt's out. I think he just keeps continue this into the last game of the season. He just dominates. And $6,500 in DraftKings is a bargain, especially if you're getting that many touches a game. Let's go look at the quarterback. Let's match him up. Jamie Newman, quarterback from Wake Forest, he's 7,900. Little expensive, but if you match those two up and they go off, it's going to be awesome. Again, they had a great game last week, 38.8 points. So there's our Kendall Hinton at 34.5, and he had 38.8. That's a huge day. Again, he struggled versus Clemson as well, but he can do things in the ground as well, not just in the air. He had 28 attempts, 144 yards, and a TD last week versus Duke. That's why he had more points than his wide receiver compadre Hinton last week. So he can do it both ways. I like him at that price point, considering he can do both the running back job and the quarterback job at Wake Forest, and I like Kendall Hinton as well. On the Syracuse side, let's look at Mo Neal, the running back, 6,300. He is the workhorse of their offense, and if they're going to get the implied 30-plus points that they're looking at, he is going to have a lot to do with it. So I would like to take him as well. Now, Wall, let's move on to our pick'ems. It's my favorite time of the show, even though I'm not very good. But last week you had Wake Forest -7. That was a win. Moves you to 9-4. I had UCF -6. They disappointed me. I did say to parlay it with the under, which was 69.5. That was a win. But the UCF -6 was a loss, which brings me to 5-7-1. Disappointing. Who are you taking this week, Will?
Which I think we should also bring up in our roundtable. Both our roundtable guests won the Woj and Wall pick'em, their guest picks. Story had Utah -22.5 against Arizona. He won that one. And then Zerk had Iowa under 47.5. Well covered that
one. Is true.
Yeah, they both won too. So that you're talking some good people last week. But this week, I'm going to have to take Cincinnati +12. Again, this is a game I want to take on the money line for reasons I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. But obviously, Woj and Wall pick'em doesn't really work that way. So I guess I'll take Cincinnati +12. I was thinking of Wake Forest, but I'm going to go with Cincinnati.
I'm looking at the Virginia Tech versus Virginia game rivalry. Virginia Tech, I'm going to go -2.5. The Hokies have won 15 consecutive in this rivalry and 18 of the 19 with only 4 resulting in settling in one possession game. So I like Virginia Tech -2.5 this week. I'm hoping to get to that 6-7-1 mark. I can almost get back to 500, Well,
you can, but what are you batting 1,000 in though, Woj?
I'm batting 1,000 in DraftKings League. I took the first week of DraftKings, scoring 244.52 points. It was a pretty big week for me. We had John Duppler in second. We had Walrus 67 in third, Story in fourth, Ace Kyle in fifth, and LW 996 in sixth. I had an awesome week. 244.52 in the big $20 contest would have got me, I think, in 50th place. I didn't play in that one, unfortunately. I played a bunch of cash games, but no big deal. It was a good win. I'll take a win where I can get it. This week, we're going to do the Saturday 11 game slate. So this week in DraftKings is just a whole big mess with different contests. There's so many single games. There's Friday slate. There's like 5 Saturday slates with like 5 games mixed in, night games mixed in, 7 games mixed in. There's a 3-game Friday slate. So it's a mess, but it's the 11-game Saturday slate that we're playing this week in our College Football Rundown DraftKings League.
Woj, I'd have to say you're probably the odds-on favorite to win it again with 244 last week, but I am nipping at your heels, Woj. I'm going to come for you this week.
Hopefully someone does. A little competition's good. I had 244. The next closest was 213. Come on, boys and girls.
Yeah, I guess you know what you're talking about, Woj. I guess you know what you're talking about.
Thanks for listening, everyone. You can catch us on Twitter at WWCFB. Our Instagram's college_football_rundown. Our website, which you can get all our podcasts and information and contact me and Kyle on, is collegefootballrundown.com. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
And this was the College Football Rundown. We're out.